Hello and welcome to episode 357 of the Mark and Me podcast. Now, joining me on today's episode is the director and documentary maker Rebecca Snow. Today's interview mostly focuses on her first ever motion picture, The Boy in the Woods. I've been lucky enough to see this and it's absolutely amazing. It's an amazing piece of work that is based on a true story of World War II survival, but I won't tell you anything else. I just urge you all to go and check it out. As you're listening to this podcast right now, you can actually go and check it out on 101 Films because it's out digitally. So if you do, as always, let me know. Now, what I want to do on today's episode is to get straight to it because I think this interview is so good and I don't want to hold it back. So here's me and Rebecca talking all things film. So Rebecca, thanks for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
Thanks for having me.
What I do, Rebecca, on every episode of the Mark and Me podcast, it doesn't matter if you're an actor, a director, a musician, is take it right back to the very start. And I'm always very intrigued, maybe as a kid, what was that first film, maybe at the cinema or at home, that made you fall in love with cinema?
Good question. Okay, well, I definitely remember the first film I saw in the cinema was Bambi because I was absolutely devastated
Oh
by
my
the death
God, yeah.
of the mum. And I'm not sure what date that was, but maybe it was like a rerun because I feel like Bambi's really an old film, so that dates me way too early. But anyway, it was definitely Bambi I saw in the cinema. That's not probably the one that inspired me to make movies. Do you know, I think one of the films, I mean, I'm a massive fan of sort of historical films. And I saw The Last of the Mohicans in the cinema
Oh, wow.
when I was about, 14 or something, and was just blown away by the depiction of this incredible, sort of what was at the time really kind of a world war, the French and Indian War in North America, the 7 Years War, we call it in England, I think. And it was just so amazingly portrayed, all the different sort of interests of everyone fighting and all the people who were sort of caught up in it. I just thought it just really transported me and I was so blown away by it. That's Michael Mann. And of course, Daniel Day-Lewis playing the lead character. I love that. I mean, I'm not sure if that's exactly what made me want to get into making films, but that definitely left a big impact.
Do you know what? When I do this podcast, they normally talk, many people talk about certain films which are quite obvious. So people talk about The Godfather or Star Wars and stuff. But I haven't seen that film for years and I completely forgot it was Daniel Day-Lewis. And now
Yeah,
I'm actually going to
yeah.
watch that tonight because I remember it being absolutely amazing.
It's an amazing film. I
It
think
is, yeah.
it's funny. And it's funny because and the other thing with me is I never thought I'd be a movie, like a narrative filmmaker, a dramatic filmmaker. I really started in documentaries and that's primarily, sort of my career's been documentaries. And one thing that I've done so much of is history documentaries. I've worked on tons of documentaries for History Channel over here in North America. And whenever I work with, historians in the field and stuff, we always end up talking about Last Mohicans because it is really kind of respected amongst historians because it's quite historically accurate in terms of
Yeah.
depictions, not necessarily in terms of story, but in terms of really capturing the world that was, the sort of the war between England and France in the Canadas and in the Americas. It's really, really grasps it really amazingly. So all historians agree with me on that one too.
So
Funny.
you mentioned obviously with your background, you weren't ever at that point when you saw Bambi and later on in life, you never probably thought I'd be making a full feature length film. You probably just dreamed of hopefully one day doing more documentaries and stuff. But I
Yeah.
wondered, do you remember the point? Maybe it was during college or university or those sort of days that you thought that's the career I want. Like I don't really want to do the 9 to 5. I want to get into something that's so creative where I get to create my vision for people to see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was always like creative as a kid. We would sort of like make videos and we'd make books and I'd make all sorts of things at home. And because we had a video camera from quite young. Both my parents are journalists, and so we had video cameras. I remember my dad always getting us to do sort of like stand-up pista cameras, wherever we were. traveling on the weekends or whatever. And so we were always kind of very aware of like the media of film and cameras. But I actually thought I would maybe be an archaeologist. I studied archaeology at university, and I planned to, be an archaeologist. And then I left university and thought, oh well, maybe before I go on to do a bit more academia, I'll, try a bit of, like history TV. So I went and did a work experience at the BBC. They had these sort of things you could apply for work experiences, and I applied for one in the history department, making history documentaries. And then I just never left. I left the BBC, but I just never left making documentaries. I really caught the bug. I love being able to bring the history to life for people. I don't do it in front of the camera, but obviously I'm sort of behind the camera. I was researching, then associate producing, and then directing documentaries. And it's just such an amazing life. You get such incredible access to places.
Yeah.
I've been on top of a scaffold in the Sistine Chapel at like midnight. I've been in the Vatican secret archives. That's been
so good.
Scanning a mummy in Argentina, like an Incan mummy. It's just all the access you get is so extraordinary. So I feel like I was kind of getting the buzz of being researching the history, like I might have been able to do as an archaeologist or an academic, but kind of bringing it also to a wider audience and really getting into those personal stories from history. I love that.
I know you'll get this question a lot, but I've spoken to quite a few people that make documentaries. Most recently, Alex Winter, who makes great documentaries. And I always feel and I say this with full respect, it must be really hard to know when your documentary has completely told the story you're trying to tell. Like, as an editor of audio, it blows my mind how much access you might get and how much material you get, and then to try and whittle that down to something that people will give their attention span to, which is not long in this today's world. But if you can get someone to buy in for a couple of hours to tell that story, I really do envy like how much work it must be, because I just don't know how when it's finished, and how you can kind of think, right, I need to walk away now and just let that be, because you could go on forever, couldn't you, editing a documentary?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways you could make a documentary, and to be honest, the edit is actually my favorite part of filmmaking, because it's really the most creative part. It's also the most challenging part, because you can completely rewrite a film in the edit. For documentaries, not so much for narratives, as I've come to learn. But yeah, for documentary, I mean, it also like, it completely depends on your audience, and it also depends who you're making the film for. I'm sometimes bound by broadcasters' requirements and expectations, so you sometimes obviously got to like sort of shape your film into how the broadcaster wants it. But in my mind, after making so many documentaries, my favorite type of documentary are the ones that are character driven, right?
Yeah.
So I've made feature-length documentaries about child survivors of the Holocaust, and about period poverty and menstrual inequity around the world, and both of those films are driven by the characters, and those are the ones that I find just you can still tell the story, tell the bigger picture, talk about the sort of social injustice or whatever it is with the menstrual inequity and period poverty, but through the voices of real people who are experiencing that. I think that's always the most compelling, is the personal stories.
You'll get this question, I'm sure, quite a lot, but with The Boy in the Woods, to make this your first narrative feature, was it a conscious choice that you knew at this point in your career you had done enough documentaries and enough editing and kind of got a good insight to the industry, ready to then take that step? Because some people do music videos, some people tell shorts and then take that step. But I wondered what it was, or how it came about for you then to say, this is the point now, I'm ready to do this.
It was quite simply the story. I really felt so strongly that the story had to be told. And if I didn't do it, I didn't know who was going to do it. I didn't think anyone was going to do it.
Yeah.
I had come across Max's story, the Boy in the Woods, Max. I'd come across his story in this 2019 documentary I made called Cheating Hitler, Surviving the Holocaust, about child survivors. Max was one of the 3 survivors that I feature in that documentary. And when I read his memoir, which is also called The Boy in the Woods, I just immediately, it struck me that, wow, this almost reads like a sort of outline for a movie script. It's an extraordinary dramatic, heroic tale of this little boy sheltering in the woods from the Nazis, and this incredible friendship that he has with this other boy. And I could just see it very clearly. I could see the narrative arc of a really kind of interesting film. And so I made the documentary, and it just kept sort of playing in my head. It wouldn't let go of me, or I wouldn't let go of the story, one or the other. And I just, that's what compelled me to write a script. I just had to. It's not, again, I didn't ever really think about making the transition from documentary to drama. And that was almost sort of the fact that it was going to be made into a drama was almost irrelevant. I just knew the story had to be told in that way. And I figured I could probably do it. I've made so many documentaries, and I'm a storyteller, and let's give it a go. And we have really great sort of support for financing of these kind of features in Canada, and I think because the story was so strong, we managed to get the funding to make it.
And that's something I was going to say. Obviously, I speak to a lot of filmmakers that will struggle and try and get their film greenlit or get over the line, and they really kind of have a long journey to kind of get the buy-in and support and the producers involved. But did you believe in your story so much with this? Obviously, from the documentary Cheating Hitler, because you had such I suppose, attachment to it and so passionate about it. Was it quite a smooth process, and then getting it over the line? Did it feel like it wasn't this horrible story that you hear where people have spent 10 years trying to get their film over the line?
Yes, it was. I feel very lucky with that. But again, I think it is because, so I think it helped that the story was so fantastic, so incredible. B, there was this memoir that had become a bestseller in Canada, The Boy in the Woods, from Max's memoir. And I had the documentary behind me. And I think all of that sort of, it helped to have all that kind of IP behind the concept, that it was easier for Canadian funders to sort of buy in. And he's a Canadian survivor. So there's, with the Canadian funders, it helps when you've got a sort of, I mean, it all takes place in Eastern Europe, obviously, during the war, but it's a sort of, he's now living in Montreal. So it's a Canadian survivor story. So all of that was sort of on my side, I think. And then it also just was it was doable for a decent budget, but low budget in the grand scheme of films, but it was a good, decent budget. And it was doable because we have some really great sort of regional incentives in Canada. So I knew that I could film it in the woods of Northern Ontario, about sort of 4 hours from Toronto, which is where I live, because I had been to the actual location where this had all happened when I was shooting the documentary. I'd been to what was Eastern Poland is now Western Ukraine. The borders have moved. And I was there, and while I was there filming the documentary, I kind of looked around and thought, this actually could be Northern Ontario. I spend a lot of time up there. My husband's family have a sort of lodge up there. And so I knew that it was possible to shoot this and fund it entirely in Canada, which just made it a bit easier and cleaner when it came to trying to get the financing together. And that's not my job. I had some amazing producers who put all that together. But yeah, I think it was very sort of, it could be packaged quite neatly as an entirely Canadian film. And that helped, I think.
Would you now, and you may already have something in the works, but would you now want to now go straight onto another feature, or are you kind of missing the documentary making and now want to return back? I mean, you must be in a position where you're like, I don't know which way to go now.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm definitely drawn back to documentary just because I do love the sort of medium of documentary. I feel you've got a bit more, you definitely got a bit more freedom. It's more sort of organic, the process of making documentaries. I've got 2 feature documentaries in sort of development with one of the big Canadian broadcasters here. So that I was immediately drawn back to that. But I'm definitely working on looking for my next story for a drama. I feel like it's going to be hard as you say, people spend 10 years developing feature films, and you have to be so passionate and you have to be so driven, and it's hard work. It's really hard work. And I was lucky with The Boy in the Woods because the story, I was so passionate about that story and telling that story, and we got it made fairly quickly. I think it was about probably all in all 3 years from beginning to write the script to actually having edited the movie. It's quite quick.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is quite quick. And so I know what's potentially ahead of me with my next story, and I don't think it's going to be that quick. And so I really need to find the right story that really grabs me. So that's what I'm sure I'll find it, but I'm not necessarily in a big hurry because I've got documentaries to make in the meantime.
Are you allowed at this point to kind of say where you want to go with your next documentary or what story you want to tell, or is that kind of top secret?
I mean, I can definitely say that one of them is a sort of big kind of social justice type documentary, which I've done before with my film Pandora's Box, lifting the lid on menstruation, but a different subject matter. And one is a much more kind of quirky, character-driven film, sort of with a global aspect as well. So yeah.
Oh, so much exciting stuff ahead.
Yeah.
So coming back off this film, now it's out there, and it must feel like when you're on set and you're making it, the end must seem so far ahead of you. But now we're actually here and the world's ready to see it. I was wondering, what was the biggest lesson you learned on set? Is there something you do differently or something that you weren't prepared for? And that's not a negative, as in, constructively. Was there something that you were like, I wasn't ready for this, or oh right, okay, this is what it's going to take to be different to documentary making?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a couple things that. So one thing that was just both a sort of extraordinary discovery, and I mean, I sort of knew it, but I hadn't quite considered it, is just how enormous the crews are on a big narrative feature, compared to documentary. So I'm used to going off into the field with maybe a maximum of 4 people on a doc. And as the director of a doc, you're often really kind of responsible for a lot of stuff on when you're on location on a doc. So I'm everything from director to talent wrangler to make sure my crew's all fed and watered and feeling happy and all that stuff. So you've got a ton of hats on, and then I walk onto the movie set, and first of all I'm slightly overwhelmed by how many people there are there, like up to 100, I think there were on my one, and there's more on much bigger sets, obviously. But also that I really am solely responsible for directing that scene. Like that's all I'm there for. I'm not there to do the sort of 5 other jobs that I have to do on documentary. So that was a real treat, actually. And it's funny, I had to really kind of, what's the word? Discipline myself to not be trying to do other jobs. And occasionally my lead actor, Jet Klein, the young boy who plays Max, would just laugh at me. He'd be like, Rebecca, my God, you're so involved compared to other directors. Because I was like moving leaves around on the ground, and like I was getting my hands dirty. I was like sweeping snow away when I didn't like. I find it really hard not to kind of muck in and do all the jobs that I suppose I'm not supposed to do. My film was a non-union film, so I wouldn't get into trouble if I was doing stuff like that. But I'm sure on a union show I'd get into trouble for doing someone else's job, or trying to help. So that was something I had to really kind of be like, no, Rebecca, just step back. You can leave, set dressing to do that or whatever. Although I did notice the actors quite liked it, that I was getting a lot more involved than with sort of the some of the other stuff than maybe other directors would. And then the other thing that the thing that I was most sort of conscious of not being practiced at was working with actors. And so that's the one thing I did a lot of work on, sort of in prep for the shoot, was listening to a ton of podcasts and reading a ton of books about directing actors. I'm used to, I'm used to trying to get non-actors to perform on camera. That's what you do in documentary. You're often filming with people who've never been on camera before. And so it was a real treat to have all these professionals, who are supposed to deliver the information on camera, which is, to shoot a scene and fulfill these characters that I'd written. And so that was amazing. And I learned a lot there. I really learned a lot working with the actors. I had some incredible actors, Jet Klein, the young kid who plays Max, who is amazing. And Richard Armitage, who is the wonderful British sort of stage and TV and film actor.
An absolute legend, yeah.
Absolute legend. And just the most wonderful, collaborative man. Really, really easy to work with, a real pleasure to work with, and extremely kind of willing to. He didn't make me feel. I mean, I was quite, oh gosh, he's a really seasoned actor, and here I am, this first time drama director. And he just he made me feel completely relaxed right off the bat, which was really nice. And we had a great rapport, and I think, I think all the actors do an incredible job in this film. It's like all of them, it's one thing to sort of write the dialogue on a page and write a scene on a page, but when you actually see it really being performed so incredibly, it really transforms all of it, beyond my imagining, which is amazing. So yeah, those were the big sort of differences for me in terms of doc to narrative.
It's all absolutely amazing to listen to, and quite inspiring. I've never made a documentary. It's not something that's on my list of things to do, but I have so much respect for you and for how much you've done and the stories you've told, and then to get this feature done and out there, it's a huge achievement. And I think that you've still got so much ahead of you. It's exciting to kind of see where this journey will take you.
Oh, thank you.
What I do, and it's my final question because obviously I'm wary of time today. What I do on the podcast, and I've done it for 351 episodes now. I've had Mads Mikkelsen, Kevin Smith, Anthony Hopkins, Aubrey Plaza, all different people from all different walks of life, but they all get the same final question.
Okay.
Very, very different to what we've talked about today. But what I do to try and make it as original as I can is I end the episode with basically you choosing a song that means something to you. I do this to try and keep every episode slightly different. So as the interview's all edited and ready for the world to listen to, you get to choose a song that plays at the end of the interview. What I really love is why that song came to your heart. Maybe it's something to do with one of your films or documentaries or just something that you love. But I wondered what song, when I asked the question, came to your kind of heart and soul before any other.
Goodness, I feel like this would have been a better response before the latest series of Stranger Things, but I would say Kate Bush, Running Up That Hill.
I love that song.
I know. I just feel like now it's so, everyone's like, oh, all these young people are like, oh, we discovered this singer called Kate Bush, and we're all like, yeah, thanks guys, she's been around for a while.
Yeah.
And we've all known that she's an absolute legend. But yeah, I would say that, and I think for a number of reasons, I love the sort of what I interpret as the message in the song, and as a woman, in the industry that I'm in, and for a long time it was really just me and a bunch of dudes on set. Like it really, on documentaries, especially documentaries about history. I do a lot of documentaries about history and war. It was usually me and a bunch of men. So the words of her song, have always resounded with me. And it's just a fantastic song. And I had the pleasure of seeing Kate Bush performing in the Hammersmith Apollo, I think it was like, when was it, like 8 years ago? And it was just completely magic, because I thought I'd never see her perform live. And of course, she came back and did a few shows.
Yeah, I wasn't able to get tickets, I don't think, and I just missed it. And it's one of those things that I'm like, oh, it'll be okay. And then I was like, oh, I know now, looking back, that was a very stupid mistake to make. But to see that live, I can't even imagine how good that could have been.
It's incredible. She's so amazing. I love her music so much.
I'm so jealous.
I was dancing to her music when I was 5, 6, 7, and then in my teens, and now, she's just like timeless. Her music.
It's incredible. Well, our time's up today. I really appreciate you coming on, and I know with the way the industry is, what I've found is it's a lot smaller than I realised, and our paths will cross. There'll be an event or a film festival or something that I'll see you at. So I hope our paths cross again, and massive congratulations with the film, and I can't wait for people to see it. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. Take care.
So there's my interview with me and Rebecca. What a great insight to the film industry, documentary making, and so much more. I'm really grateful for Rebecca giving up her time and coming on the show, and I hope you all, as I said at the start of today's interview, now go and check out her work. Also, if you've listened to Mark and Me today and you've enjoyed this interview, please feel free to share it. As always, it costs absolutely nothing to do. It's literally the click of a couple of buttons. You can do this via Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and it really goes a long way in spreading the word of Mark and Me out there to a whole new audience. So please, as you're listening, go on your social media and share it. I see people doing this each and every week, and it means the whole world to me. If you want to go that little extra mile, I do have a Patreon. Each and every month to say thank you for supporting me on Patreon, I give you a welcome pack that includes stickers and badges. You get a monthly newsletter, episodes that are exclusive just for you guys called The Lost Tapes, which won't get heard by the general public, and so much more. And it really is crucial to keep the podcast going if you can support me, and the link is on markandme.com now. Now I am going to go because I'm absolutely snowed under with editing. I think right now I've got about 10 to do over the next 2 days, but that means so much material for you guys at home. But before I go, let's say a quick thank you to the sponsor of the podcast, Richer Sounds. As always, guys, if you're in the market for anything to do with home video or TV or cinema, why not go on richersounds.com or visit any of their high street stores and treat yourself to something special. Right, I'm off, so look after yourself, take care, and I'll speak to you all very soon.
You and